As this channel has reached 500 subscribers, I decided to do something a bit different. So here is a list of 500 things you might not know about The Witcher. As 500 is a lot, you might know some of these. But let's get into it. There is another continent to the west of the continent where The Witcher takes place. This continent would eventually be discovered by Fabio Sachs. His name can also be found on the backside of the map that came with The Witcher 3. There are mammoths on the continent, but they live north of the Dragon Mountains. Zarikania is named after a legendary golden dragon named Zarikania. Drowners, while very common, never make an appearance in the books besides being mentioned. The Nilfgaardian language is based on the Elder speech, the Elven language. There are creatures in The Witcher that can create illusions of armies and dragons. Ciri, at some point, was supposed to marry Windhelm of Atre. Windhelm of Atre died during the Second Northern War, as Nilfgaard made an example out of him by executing him in a spectacle for his role in the leadership of a rebellion in Sintra. The Lord has 12 members and is seated at a round table when convening. This is said often to be the same amount as how many knights King Arthur had at his table, although this does differ. At the end of the books, Ciri goes to visit King Arthur. Corvo Bianco, the vineyard Geralt receives in Blood and Wine, is mentioned in the books. There is an orangutan that lives in the Oxenford Academy. You can find a crafting recipe in Hearts of Stone at a circus for a disguise that combines the professor's glasses and the donkey ears. King Vivril of Addern defeated Medal of Temeria's armies at Hague. 40 years later, their sons would discuss the fate of the North, there among several other monarchs. Unicorns can travel between worlds. Geralt killed a rat by throwing a fork at it in complete darkness. Ciri, at some point, was to marry Gistrin. Gistrin would later overthrow his father Ervil, the king of Verden, as his father betrayed his own kingdom. Besides the 5 well-known Witcher signs of Gwen, Aard, Igni, Axi and Írden, there is also a sign named Somne, which puts people to sleep. There is one more sign, named Heliotrope. This one protects the one who casts it from any type of impact for a short while, which makes it stand apart from Gwen's longer duration. There are krakens in the ocean of The Witcher. Sheridan, the elf in The Last Wish that is in love with Yennefer, appears in The Witcher 1. Jorvath is mentioned in the books. Nilfgaard's capital is named the City of Golden Towers because of the reflection of the sunlight dancing on the rooftops. Humans arrived in the north during the first landing around 760. The Dauk and the Voskor were humans that lived in the north before the first landing. Ciri, at some point, was supposed to marry Radovid. Radovid is only about 17 years old in The Witcher 3. Geralt was kind of killed by a guy named Rob. Humans that live near Brokilon would sometimes send in sick girls to the forest, as they hoped that they would make dryads ill and kill them with the disease. Dryads are immune to diseases and would often turn these girls into dryads. A Zoogle is a monster that lives in trash. Fen came up with the idea to ride naked on the back of Nivellen while blowing a horn. Cats don't like witchers. Nibbles the cat likes Geralt. Ermion in the games is Mousesack from the books. Ciri at some point wanted to marry Hjalmar. They fell in love after Hjalmar got injured trying to outperform Ciri on ice skates. The crazy man building the giant ship on Undvik is Harald an Tordarroch, former Jarl of Undvik. There is a castle on the border between Sedaris and Temeria, where a group of mages who are not under the control of the Brotherhood experiment with new weapons, elixirs and other things. It was led by Ortolan, the mage who also invented the life-prolonging elixirs that all mages use. He wanted everyone to have it, even common people, but the Brotherhood deceived him and made him believe that everyone had access to it, while they kept it for themselves. Somewhere in Nilfgaard, there is a city named Viroleda, which is renowned for its high-quality swords. Sword fighters from the city developed a fighting style which allowed them to fight up to 9 people at the same time. Deathmold had a brother named Drithelm, who was also a mage. He was killed during the Tenet's coup by an arrow to the eye. There's a person or creature in Upper Posada who flies around on a broom at night and performs abortions during the day. Ciri, when she was 10, was in love with the famous warrior from Skellige named Olaf Stigvason. He, however, was 25 years older than her and is already married and had children that were older than Ciri. After Ciri learned of this, she attempted suicide by drowning, but she waited for the perfect weather. And while she waited, she grew over him and made up her mind. Milva's real name is Maria Bering. Dandelion's real name is Julian Alfred Pancras, Viscount de Lettenhove. Dandelion had a cousin, who was the son of his father's brother. This cousin is Ferrand de Lettenhove, royal instigator in Carrick. Yennefer secretly gives Geralt money by increasing the contract prices he is going after. While Goetia is forbidden by the Brotherhood, some sorcerers still teach it at Oxenford Academy. While in Oxenford, Geralt would often go to classes about magic, monsters and other stuff that could come in handy on the path. Geralt once saved a friendly werewolf named Otto Dussart, who would go on to marry another werewolf and have some werewolf children. There was a murderer named Ralph Blunden, who went by the nickname of the Professor. This is a different man than the Professor in The Witcher 1. Yennefer saved Hjalmar by forcing him to go on a different ship than hers. Before he had his first wife, with whom he had Hjalmar, Krach Ancreet had a short affair with Yennefer of Vengerberg. In the kingdom of Jammerlach, there reigned a king who was said to be about 100 years old and very cruel. It was said that he couldn't sleep unless someone was tortured to death. He also wiped out all of his relatives, resulting in his kingdom disappearing after he died. It is now part of Redania. Rayla lost her hand after she refused to drop a sword. Geralt once broke into a gnomish fortress inside a mountain to kill a sorcerer. Menno Coulhorn, the Nilfgaardian who led the central attack on the Nilfgaardian army during the Second Northern War, is named after a Dutch military figure from the 17th century. Joachim de Wet, leader of Army Group West during the Second Northern War, is possibly named after Johan de Witt, another person from Dutch history. The third leader of the war, who led the Eastern Front, is therefore the only one out of the three that didn't have a name originating in Dutch. Isengrim Faulitiarna's name, with some minor adjustments, could be translated as Wolf Wolf Lord. Therefore, if someone calls him by his nickname, Iron Wolf, followed by his name, he would be called Iron Wolf Lord. Jorved's looks are based on how Isengrim is described in the books. Hierarch Hemelfart appears in person in The Witcher 3. He is the one that the drunken witches call with the megascope. In Ophir, the person who can be seen as the captain of the guard of the king is called a royal assassin. Most people know Zarikania lies to the east, but many seem to forget that Hakeland also lies in the east. Hakeland invaded the northern kingdoms twice, the most notable being in 1350, when they burned, pillaged and slaughtered for an entire year. There is a tracker named Boreas Munn, who is said to be able to track a fish through water. He also travelled with Isengrim and Dijkstra towards the east. The Elba, the river that Nilfgaard's capital lies next to, is named after the Scottish Gaelic name for Scotland. Cairngorm, a kingdom and part of the Hangforce League, is most likely named after the Scottish National Park named the Cairngorms. There is a witcher from the school of the Manticore that converted and is now preaching the words of Lebioda throughout the north. Wendigos were originally said to appear in The Witcher 3, but they were cut from the game during development. They are, however, still mentioned in The Witcher 3, and are said to be found in places like Kovir. Belohun of Carrack was so paranoid of being overthrown that he exiled his oldest son, which led to him being overthrown. Egmont, one of Belohun's sons, was said to have black hair, while he has brown hair in his Gwent card. Dandelion's work, half century of poetry, would be found several centuries after the events of the books during excavations in Beauclair. A rumor spread that the tube in which he kept the papers contained gems, and thus it was stolen. The thieves eventually burned Dandelion's works, for they thought that the paper in the tube was magic and cursed. This version of half century of poetry by Dandelion was lost by him during the Lady of the Lake, when he left it in Anna Henrietta's wardrobe. He left it after he had read his own work and decided to start over. It is said that if a female from Ciri's family dies, that there will be heavy storms at sea. There is a professor at Oxford Academy named Leon Oppenhauser who invented a perpetual motion device. It broke down due to the shockwave caused by the destruction of Stega Castle. The name of this professor is a reference to Oppenheimer. He is the person whose statue stands at the entrance to the Academy in The Witcher 3. There is an area between Angren and Rietboon that is named the Dank Wilderness. For though the Dank Wilderness was so dank that it would have been difficult to imagine anything danker, is an actual quote from the books. During a pogrom in Vengerberg, Yennefer helped a dwarven family to stay safe and survive. They were the Giancardis, bankers, and Molnar Giancardi, who do work for her without costs or interest as a way to thank her. Yennefer and Ciri were both born around Ballantine. Witchers can actually jump down from heights, as which one normally would break their legs, while witchers are able to land silently and directly cut someone down. When Calanth died, she was 45 years old. Yennefer's mother was possibly named Yanka, although there are some conflicting sources for this. Stefan Skellen's nickname, Tawny Owl, was possibly a reference to the book Rules for a Knight, where Tawny Owl presented a chapter about equality, something that Stefan Skellen wanted to achieve in Nilfgaard. Stefan Skellen wanted Nilfgaard to become a democracy. The city of Novigrad has 35 inns. In the time between the First and Second Northern War, there were several rebellions in Nilfgaard. As a result of one of these rebellions, the Ebbing Confederation insurrection, members of the gang that would become the Reds met each other. There was a kingdom named Amblonia, located near the Pontar Delta, that was split up and absorbed by Temeria and Redania. There were bands of criminals in service for Redania that would place border markers further in Temeria's land to expand Redania's territory and extort the peasants that lived there. Geralt slept with Eithne's daughter. Renfri is a version of Snow White. Shinas is a version of the Little Mermaid. Nivellen is a version of Beauty and the Beast. There was a gnome named Rumpelstiltskin who invoked the law of surprise. It is speculated that the Winter Queen was a female leader of the Wild Hunt who served in Aradin's position before him. Tessaya de Vries in the Netflix show is played by the same person who voiced Anna Henrietta in Blood and Wine. In contrast to what some believe, Tessaya viewed Philippa Aelhart as her best student. If not for her untimely demise, Tessaya might have become a member of the Lords of Sorceresses. The only member of the Lords that never appears in the games is Francesca Findabair. Depending on your choices, at the end of The Witcher 3, 3 to 5 members of the Lords could have died. Within 100 to 200 years after the events of the books, all elves have left the continent. When they left for another world, they took all portraits and images of Francesca Findabair with them. More Witcher games have been sold than that there are people living in Poland. If you perform the egg ritual without Guillaume, Vivienne, when she's in Novigrad, will give you a feather which you can wear behind your ear. You can't remove it, however. Geralt's swords were once sold by the father and uncle of the Borsodi brothers from Hearts of Stone. There is a village west of Beauclair that is a reference to the Norwegian town Rjukan. You can find a letter talking about using mirrors to reflect the sunlight. There was a man from Rivia named Amadeus Ritterhof who thought he could outsmart Count Dim by only giving him his soul once the sun rises over Rivia in the dark of night. He didn't expect Nilfgaard's invasion. Reynard Odo appears in the books, albeit without having a first name. Geralt's quote, "If that's what it takes to save a world, it's better to let that world die," that appears below his Gwent card, comes from an interaction he had with Emir, once Emir told him he wanted to marry Ciri and get her pregnant. When Dandelion was about to be executed in Toussaint, the executioner refused to kill him because Dandelion would not forgive him for what he was about to do. Throughout The Witcher 3, you can find notices on board about a man named Odin who drinks, eats and scams people all over the continent. He can be found in-game in Witcher 3, sleeping next to a merchant that sells empty bottles. He was originally from Witcher 2, but seems to have become a running joke for CD Projekt Red, as he also appears in The Witcher 3, both the expansions, Thronebreaker, and has his own Gwent card. There are gigantic scorpions, named Gigascorpions, that can be found in the deserts of The Witcher. Mages were betting with each other on how long Yennefer and Geralt would last together after the events of The Last Wish. Litanade, better known as Coral, won this bet. Geralt once rode on the back of a knocker. Cats can sense places of power and will often sleep on them. There is a song from the books that was made into a real song in the first 2 games. Cidarians, are kind of the mainland version of Skelligers. King Venslot of Bruges proposed to Calanth after Rukner had died. King Ervil of Verden proposed to Calanth as well. In the end, after receiving multiple proposals from Eist, she eventually married him. The reason why Calanth married Rukner of Ebbing, who came from Ebbing, which is kind of a distance away from the north, is due to the fact that many in the north thought she had a relationship with a family member Mieve. Rukner of Ebbing's name is actually Rukner de Salm, as he was a duke of the region Salm in Ebbing. Once he arrived in the north, he was named of Ebbing to make him sound like he was a prince down south and not a duke. Calanth has two graves, one in Sintra and one next to Eist's grave in Skellige. Both, however, are empty, as her body was never recovered. Among the cut content for The Witcher 3 was an ability that would allow Geralt to see inside monsters and cut with great precision. The amount of soup in the cauldron in the Quest for the Spotted White in the Spoon Collector differs based on your choices. If left alone, Roach will go search for some food or water in The Witcher 3. There is a ghost ship that appears every night at a specific spot in Skellige. During development, there were concepts made for a boat which would allow Geralt to take Roach with him. Those small monk-like things that run around in The Witcher 1 are Mamoons. There are large crocodiles living in the swamps of the north. Dijkstra had his own personal execution camp named Drakenborg. Those awaiting their deaths would be served a diluted wine, which was named Dijkstra Dry. This wine also appears in The Witcher 3, and can be bought at a few inns, like for example the Seven Cats Inn. Jorveth likes to make Lord of the Rings references. Kalkstein was burned at the stake just before The Witcher 3. When he died, a message appeared in the air saying Radovid sucks fleshed cock. Sultan was engaged to a dwarven woman named Eudora Breckenriggs. The engagement, however, was called off by her father after Zoltan had assisted a group of Scoia'tael. Dopplers can only transform into creatures that are about the same size and mass as they are. Vimy Vivaldi's looks were changed in an update before Heart of Stone. Nadia Esposito is the name of the woman who was said to be the one who caused the Rivian pogrom. Calanth got her nickname Lioness of Sintra when she was 15 years of age, after winning the Battle of Hogebus. Almost all of the vineyards in Blood and Wine are mentioned in the books. The Bloody Baron, while he was still a soldier for Temeria, helped put down an insurrection in Sedaris. Para-Zugals are mutated Zugals that eat trash. There are ogres on the continent, so Shrek better start hiding from Geralt. The ruler of Avir has the title Malik. A Nazeri duke named Adam once decided to try and change the flow of the Samur to a river. This led to some destruction and bad consequences to Saw, as the duke forgot that the river also flowed through other lands. Regis was born in 839. This was about 111 years before the first Witchers were created. The Isle of Thanet is hollow. King Idi had stolen the crown of Kovir from the Tysons. While he was the king, he banished Geralt so that he wouldn't have to pay him. He was later killed during the Night of Knives and Torches, in which Estrad took his throne back from both Idi and Reed, who had taken over Povis. Only two northern rulers knew that the Ciri Emir married wasn't the real one, One of these two was Maeve, who was close with Calanth, and she thought that the false Ciri didn't look like her parents or her grandparents. But she decided to stay quiet for reasons of state. Fake Ciri died around the year 1331. The scholar that teaches Geralt Gwent will die exactly as how Geralt predicts it will happen. Manticores are not that much larger than lions. The fate of Menno Coehorn is unknown to those who live on the continent. Duntine in Toussaint was once inhabited by a man named Walgarius the Cuckold. Walgarius killed his cheating wife, her lover, her mother, her sister and her brother, and then sat down and started crying. Hundreds of years ago, the humans wiped out all the elves that lived in Toussaint. One of the men that conspired against Emhyr during the Second Northern War wanted Emhyr to marry his wife. Ciri visited our Earth a few times in the books. She appeared in Scotland in 1905. If it wasn't for an Nilfgaardian scout being scared of the Nordlings due to the tales he had heard, Nilfgaard might have won the Battle of Brenna. The graves on the graveyards of Toussaint are filled with Easter eggs, as well as references to the developers. There is no reference to Geralt's deceased friend from Toussaint, Reynard de Bois-Fresne. There are 3 people in The Witcher who are named the Lady of the Lake. Those are Ciri, Nimue, and the nymph from the games. Geralt can sleep with the Lady of the Lake from the games.
Your ass puts others to shame.
Ophir didn't have the best relationship with Nilfgaard, and thus they supported the Northern Realms and read of it during the Third Northern War. The Saya de Vries has a kind of OCD. While most of the North was at peace with Nilfgaard between the First and Second Northern War, this wasn't the case for Skellige. In the time between 1263 and 1267, Krach an Craite led regular raids to forts and settlements along the Nilfgaardian coast. As a result, he got the nickname Thirth is Muur, the wild boar of the sea. In Nilfgaard, they scare children with his nickname. Maeve's former husband, Reginald, was said to be one of the stupidest kings around. Their 2 children, Willem and Anses, were said to be even stupider. Estrod Thyssen and Nidemir planned to create an alliance between their houses by marriage of their children. Emhyr var Emrys is younger than Foltest. Maeve wanted Ciri to marry one of her knights, keep them in a castle in her land hidden for some time, until they would eventually have 2 children and a third on their way. Brokilon provides shelter for the Scoia'tael. During the Second Northern War, Brokilon was seen as a protective force for the North, as they would also shoot the Nilfgaardians on sight. When the Dryads shoot someone near the forest, they mostly try to kill them when they are in the water, so that the bodies float away and the stench doesn't remain near Brokilon. Several northern kings wanted Ciri to die, to prevent Emhyr from marrying her. It is rumored that there might be a giant creature that have lived on the bottom of the Setna Abyss. Shup started trading card kegs because of Maeve and Reynard. The School of the Griffin is located in Caer Seren. Their school wasn't destroyed or attacked by humans. Instead, mages had an avalanche fall down on the castle because the Witchers would not share some of their knowledge with them. Because of the superior quality of swords from Mahakam, the Rivian smiths and workshops were barely able to operate. Some of the less well-off Rivians would sometimes try to steal ores and gems from the mines of Mahakam. The common elven ancestors of the An-El and the An-Shea were the An-Undod. The Vodyanoi have their own language. If Cora kidnaps an elven child, the parents won't make an attempt to get it back. A lot of the dropouts from Aretusa become lawyers. Cadwyn recruits dropouts from Banart for their secret service. The coast between Redania and Kovir is named the Ark Coast. There was a minor quest removed in which you had to make an omelette for Yennefer. There was a pretty big side quest that was removed from The Witcher 3, in which you meet Jorvet and Saskia again. Even if you choose to fight on the side of Vergen in The Witcher 2, it would shortly after be taken over by Nilfgaard and disbanded. Some believed that the detective agency of Codringer and Fen only existed out of Codringer, as he would use several aliases and Fen was never seen. Jacob Fen is one of the only characters that we know of in The Witcher that is a human with dwarfism. Bran, the king of Skellige, whose funeral is going on when you arrive, died by fighting a bear. As is a Skellige tradition, that when one becomes old and weak, they will go into the woods to fight a bear with a knife, so they can die on their own terms. At the time of his death, Bran was about 80 years old. After what happened to Dany and Pavetta, Glanth made Krach Ancret swear a blood oath to always protect Ciri, and give her help when needed. There once was a legendary witcher from the school of the Griffin named Raven. His armor itself was also of a legendary level, being crafted by the gnomes beneath Mount Carbon and finished by the elven master blacksmith Tiensale. Tiensale was the elven teacher of Grandmaster Smith Lazar Lafargue from Beauclair. In The Witcher 3, you can retrieve the coin that you paid for the trip to Skellige by looting the body of the captain that sailed you there. The fire breather at the wedding in the Heart of Stone, David Artensborough, is a reference to the well-known naturalist David Attenborough. In the non-canon short story Something Ends, Something Begins, Dijkstra has become the king. This was possibly the motivation behind why he was an option to rule the North in The Witcher 3. You can get the hair mask that Milton wore when he was killed by revisiting where he had died. You can find a grave in a graveyard within Beauclair's walls for Milton after he died. Caldwell, the count that handed over Lyria and Rivia to Nilfgaard, kept asking for more power from Ardo Abdai. So Ardo ordered him to be poisoned after Meath has been defeated. Nilfgaardian spies are trained from an early age and will go to extreme lengths to serve the Empire. Aramas the Cheese Mage wanted to study necromancy at first, but ended up with Tauromancy by accident. A Vaidemaker is a druid specialized in manipulating weather. After Vilgefortz lost his eye, he tried to gain it back by using a gem in his eye socket. After the Lodge became public knowledge, Carthia van Kanten had to go into hiding and flee. To do so, she needed money, and that's why she's the Passiflora Gwent tourney in Novigrad. The Quartermaster at the Nilfgaardian camp in The Witcher 3 is the cousin of Tibor Eggebracht, a Nilfgaardian colonel who died at Brenna. During The Witcher 3, John Natalis is missing or he has went underground. From 1135 to 1267 there was a carp at the Imperial Palace with a gold commemorative medal of Taurus var Emrys attached to his gills, swimming in an artificial pond. After the carp died, Emir planned to replace it with one that had his likeness. Before the Second Northern War, there were some kings that were afraid that Visigoth might have wanted to marry Ciri and become king of Sintra. Nilfgaard has 30,000 inhabitants. The Battle of Brenna was fought at the village named Old Bottoms. It is however referred to as the Battle of Brenna because nobody would take the name Battle of Old Bottoms seriously. The key to Yennefer's room is classified as a common item in The Witcher 3. Estrad Thyssen died to the assassins that as he chose to protect his wife and make sure she was unhurt, while he could have easily fought them off at the risk that one might have hurt her. Estrad's wife, Queen Zuleika, is very religious and one of the most prominent followers of the good book in The Witcher. The White Frost is actually an ice age that takes centuries and not some magical force like this in the games. 90% of the land in the world The Witcher is located in the northern hemisphere. It is speculated that Emperor Calvite had zombie soldiers. At the time of Blood and Wine, Dandelion is older than Cloth when she died. Most major human cities are built on the ruins of elven cities and palaces. Elves never learned how to grow crops. While in Blaviken, Stregobor went by the name of Arion, who was the mage that built the tower he lived in. The part in The Lave Lake, where Geralt and Virgilla are having a fun time together, was written by Sapkowski as a way to prove that he could write such a scene without vulgar words by using books instead. The Russian publisher of the Witcher books at one point demanded that the translator would change Mistel's gender to become a boy because of the relationship she had with Ciri. If you've ever wondered if Leo Bonhart could have defeated Geralt, the answer is that we will never know, as Sapkowski has refused to answer that question because Leo Bonhart was created for Ciri and never meant to meet or face Geralt. Blood of Elves was the first book that Sapkowski wrote on a computer. Encyclopedia Maximundi, an encyclopedia that's often quoted between chapters in the books, is written from Nilfgaard's point of view in the future, where there possibly are no more Nordlings left. While thinking of names for characters, Sapkowski often used encyclopedias and lesser known dictionaries and opened them on random pages for character names. This is how characters like Demavend and Nenneke have got their names. When writing the 5-book saga of The Witcher, the fragment that Sapkowski wrote first was the fight between the Rats and Leo Bonhart. The saga at first was supposed to be 3 books, but it became 5 as Sapkowski wanted to release 1 book every year. Geralt's dislike for politics is most likely taken from Sapkowski's feelings for politics, as he had absolutely no interest in it. Philippa Eilhart is supposed to die within 1 year from the events of Blood and Wine, as she died in a witch hunt which lasted until 1276. Nilfgaard had its own intelligence network named Nilfgaard Security Bureau. They would often work together with the Redanian intelligence and share information. Near the village of Dirge, there's a small side quest in Witcher 3, which seems to feature a possible ghost dog. There is a river called the O that runs nearby the A. There are many strange laws and customs in Mahakam that are punishable by death. From a mountain while in a barrel. Ever since Nilfgaard conquered Geso, it has been overrun by criminals and bandits. The moment when the north is said to be covered in ice is about 3000 years away from the time of the books. Triss used to live in a tower in Maribor. There are barely any young elves left that are able to have children, as most died fighting for Elerin or the Scoia'tael. In Lyria and Rivia, the ruler is assisted by a council of peers. Their seat is located in Lyria. Lyria and Rivia only united once Meath and Reginald married. The barony of Kraigjau earns most of its coin by selling wood to Kovir. Jan Becker was the first Nordling mage. The stronghold of Mirth was the original seat of the Mage of the North, until it was destroyed by Falka in her rebellion. The Novigrad Union was a truce between kings, mages, druids and priests, signed not long after the first landing. Geoffrey Monk, one of the first 3 mages that signed this union, at some point convinced elven mages in Lochmuin to train a group of children. Among these children was a boy named Gerhard of Isle, better known as Hengum Deith, the oldest sorcerer in the 5 saga books. The chapter was founded by 6 mages: Herbert Stammelford, Aurora Hansen, Ivor Richard, Agnes of Glenville, Geoffrey Monk, and Redmere of Torcarnet. There was once a mage who ruled Temeria named Rothard the White. Shortly after the chapter was founded, there was a brutal war between mages. In the end, the chapter won, and all those who opposed were slaughtered and executed. Among the dead was Rothard the White. A mage named Clara Larissa de Winter founded Aretusa. Clara Larissa de Winter had mastered the element of fire, which I found kind of funny as her last name is Winter. The magical blockade on Garstang was placed there by Nina Fioravanti and took a year to complete. Tisaya de Vries took it down in a matter of seconds. The barrier was placed when, during a discussion in the past, some mages would get a bit too invested and they burned the hair of Nina Fioravanti with a ball of lightning. Eithne's daughter died defending the borders of Brokilon. After her death, the Dryads would shoot to kill faster than before, reducing the amount of warning shots. During the meeting at Hague, King Demavend of Aedirn had some very stupid ideas, like trying to invade Mahakam and let Urville wipe out the Dryads. Triss told Ciri to wear a dress in Kaer Morhen whenever she was on her period, as a way to let them know that she would not strain on those days. Regis is fireproof. Visigoth wanted to hang Geralt for what he had done in Sintra when he had claimed Ciri. Radovid III of Redania was fine with witchers as long as they paid their taxes. Everett, the young boy that kept bragging about his father being a soldier while on a barge with Geralt, would later on become professor at Oxenford Academy. Desaya de Vries was for the sterilization of mages. She, however, isn't responsible for those who are sterile, as it is part of becoming a mage, which is something that however sometimes seems not to happen to some. The mutations that transform a boy into a witcher take about a week until they are fully completed. It was believed by many that Meath had died when Nilfgaard took her land in the Second Northern War. Most people only learned that she was alive after the Battle of the Bridge. During the Second Northern War, Meath and her guerrilla army hid in Angren and would sometimes cross the Ruga, the river, to fight Nilfgaardians on the other side. After they were on one of these excursions, a group of Nilfgaardians who was doing the same thing in the opposite direction also wanted to cross this bridge, which is how the Battle of the Bridge started. Dandelion doesn't sleep, he thinks creatively. Leo Bonhart has no eyebrows or eyelashes. Geralt once wrote on the back of a knocker. Florence Delanoy, a linguist and a historian who wrote several books about Ciri and Geralt along with several fairy tales, was born in Vicovaro in 1431 and died in 1510. Florence Delanoy is mentioned in The Witcher 1, while he would not be born for another 161 years. The Encyclopedia Maxima Mundi were written in the 16th century or later, as they mention Florence Delanoy. Estrad Thyssen and his wife Zuleika were among the very few kings and queens that actually loved each other. There were plenty of jokes made at Kaer Morhen while witchers were trained, however the teachers repeated them so often that they weren't funny anymore to the witchers they trained. There was a monster named a Corat, which was cut from The Witcher 3 in development. This creature is described by an in-universe book as "We shall not waste breath on this whoreson." Another name for this creature is Rumpelstiltskin. Many common folk believed that witcher swords were cursed. The mage, Geoffrey Monk, recommended other mages to empty their bladder and defecate before teleporting. Visigotha was banished from Nilfgaard. The empire, however, grew so fast that the place he was hiding in became part of the empire once again. Geralt once convinced a few people that witcher swords were invisible. The sorceress, Litanade, Coral, had a bat the size of a ship's deck. The Druid Forest of Cat Mirkvid can be seen in the Blood and Wine expansion, but can't be accessed. Out of the more than 20 members of Stefan Skellen's gang, only 3 seemed to have survived the books. Those 3 were Boreas Munn, Dagras Elephant and Johanna Selborn. Johanna Selborn might have been involved in the disappearance of a ship named the Southern Star before she joined Stefan Skellen's gang. She is a psionic, which means that she can read minds and sometimes see the nearby future. She would later use her powers to have the judge set her free when she was imprisoned by Nilfgaard for her involvement with Stefan Skellen. There are gnomes in the Teatrashire Mountains, They however fled deeper into the mountains when Nilfgaard invaded the land next to the mountain range, so they would not be forced to work for them. Velen is the second largest trade city in the north, after Novigrad. The Scoia'tael would sometimes use banned weapons, which would inflict large amounts of pain and suffering to those who were hit. There is an underground resistance movement in Nilfgaard started in this year, named the Crescent Moon. In the cities within Nilfgaard itself, tax collectors will sometimes go house to house to give the people oranges and sweet sun-shaped cakes to symbolize the blessing of the emperor. The birthmark above Kiramet's breast is a small detail that was mentioned in the books. In 1245, a giant wave hit Corat, killing a lot of men, women and children. Before the Second Northern War, there were royal messengers that were afraid that they would lose their job because mages could communicate faster with each other. In the books, Ciri would from time to time enter a kind of trance where she would predict how people that she met were going to die. A few examples of this were Cohen, Geralt and Applegate. Vesemir, at some point in the past, sent a witcher named Adan of Caras to Beauclair to have a set of Grandmaster woven gear forged. Vesemir, however, gave the witcher not enough coin to pay for the job, and so Adan of Caras took a job that would cost him his life. There was a court sorceress from Gemera, named Ira Frostsinger, who, after Nilfgaard took over the kingdom, fled into the mountains, where she created a werewolf-like creature that was faster and stronger, named Maugrim. As she threatened to attack Nilfgaardians in the land, the king sent a witcher after her and her beast. This witcher retreated after his first battle with the beast and forged a special silver sword to deal with it, named after the beast, Maugrim. With this sword, he would kill the sorceress in her sleep and take both her head and that of the beast back to the king. Milva got her first archery lesson from her father after her brother died. There once was a man named Heinrich who captured a dryad so that he could have intercourse with her. The dryad, however, didn't like this and formed a dagger as hard as steel out of the wood from the bed that which she was tied to, and killed him once he left her alone for a short moment. The usurper was killed by an executioner named Daveti of Metina. It was said that the axe he used was given to him by the emperor, in which the laws of Nilfgaard were engraved. There was once a troll named Rognar Hardhead, where a few trolls worked for him and took over a southern branch of the Mahakam mines. There were too many trolls in that mine to deal with them outright, and thus the only option was to fight him in a one-on-one duel. The problem was that this troll would only participate in headbutting battles. To deal with this, a dwarf named Yoroth forged a giant hammer with the face of a troll on the one end, and he challenged the troll and killed him in one blow. While Teranthropes are humanoids that transform into creatures, Antharians transform from a creature into a humanoid. In The Witcher 3, you can find altars in Skellige that are reminders of a once more common religion of Svalbard. The Vildkars from Valhalla were among the last to survive that worshipped this god. Geralt once dared Codringer to throw an Orion at him while facing the opposite direction. Regis would sometimes wear a hat. There was a man named Hotspur who died for having intercourse with Ciri. It is a Skellige tradition that a girl has the right to an expensive gift from her first lover. Ciri therefore claimed a magical bracelet from Hotspur, which would call his horse, who now became Ciri's horse Kelpie. Ciri named her horse Kelpie because she was black and agile as a sea kelpie. There was a man named Gabriel who made small crossbows which he would be suited for self-defense against robbers. They, however, became popular amongst the robbers and thugs in the end. The crossbow from Witcher 3 is most likely a Gabriel. Ciri did fist tag with the Alder King. Cats can see things that are invisible. Besides the often mentioned White Frost, Ithilien predicted way more future events, like for example the Witch Hunt, the Northern Wars, the Great Plagues, the War of the Two Unicorns. Isgith means mud hole. There are many unknown species of monsters in Isgith that not even Witchers know about. Witchers rarely visit Isgith, because the few people that live there often see the monsters as part of nature and try to stay away from them. There is an underwater city off the coast of Bremerford. Dryads live in trees that are shaped into huts with magic. Geralt once almost had a fight with a mage named Lodbor of Murivel when the mage tried to cheat in a game of dice using magic. There was a mage named Old Gorzard who had offered Geralt 100 marks if he allowed him to dissect his eyes, and 1,000 marks if he could do a post-mortem. Both Lodbor of Murivel and Old Gorzard were members of the 14 of the Hill. Around the time when Sintra was invaded, Geralt was in the northern part of the Northern Kingdoms. Geralt has emotions. You might even say that he is very emotional. While Sintra was under siege, no one dared to kill Calanth when she asked for it, and thus she threw herself off a tower. Borge 3 Jackdaws, the Golden Dragon Philanthropimurth, is the narrator of Thronebreaker. Yennefer once cast the spell using her legs instead of arm. She is among the only mages to ever accomplish this. The story of Yennefer's magic led to people at the School of Bon Art also trying this, however they were drunk and tried to cast spells with the genitals. Sorceresses and witches can fly on broomsticks. Geralt was sued by the mages of Risberg, and his bank account was closed, resulting in him losing his money. That guy Foltest wants you to hit with a ballista is most likely a distant relative of Ciri. Higher vampires can't be seen through magical scanning. After the death of Windhelm of Atre in the Second Northern War, the title of Duke of Atre was given to a different family. Dagorad, the father of Calanth, was the first king in Cintrian history whose name did not begin with the letter C. Adalia, the mother of Calanth, was friends with many sorceresses, including Thessia de Vries. The mage, Sorel Degerlund, killed another mage named Harland Sara and kept his head as a trophy. Veraxis is the last competent king of Carrack. After him, the kingdom will fall in decline until it ceases to exist. At some point in the future, it is not known where Rivia was precisely located. Drake Bondu, a Skellige Skald, who played at Pavetta's feast, dies during the Berserker attack at Caer Trolde. Besides werewolves and werecats, there are also were-rats in The Witcher. Geralt has taken a bath with Borge 3 Jackdaws. Yennefer will feel sick after warming water using magic. Urviel of Verden is said to be attracted to children. Vea's real name is Alvenerle. Thea and Vea, Zarikanians that follow Borch, are blonde. There is also no mention of them having a darker skin tone than the Nordlings. Zarikania is ruled by a queen. This queen, at some point after the Second Northern War, ordered Borch to be brought to her. Each year, dwarves from Hakam hold a spring cleaning in which they wipe out most of the monsters in the mountains. There was a revolution that was put down by Redania, in which students from the Academy wanted the kingdom to become a democracy. Eskel got his face scar as a result of a surprise child. Bran's human name was Mona. The magical portal at Tor Lara was discovered by a mage named Emmanuel Benevent. In Geso, there are two Nilfgaardian families, the Varnhagens and the Spears, who are sworn enemies and will fight each other to the death when seeing members of the other family. The city of Bakala is the southernmost city on the Nilfgaardian Empire. The ship named Catriona, after which the plague is named, came from Bakala. Oriana is a Bruxa. Bassain Farm in Toussaint was originally the home of two elder werewolves. This was not publicly known, as they were evicted by a countess. The old male werewolf was angry after having to live in a cave for a few nights and seeing what it did to his wife. And so, he returned to the farm to kill those who evicted him. Sultan and his band of dwarves robbed a wealthy hawker and left him in a ditch near Dillingen. The condemned victims at Drakenborg would sing a song named the Clown's Anthem over and over until they themselves were hanged. Regis makes a great distillate out of female mandrake. There are people that smoke weed on the continent. Regis doesn't drink alcohol. Radovid the Stern has two older sisters. One became a priest, while the other possibly became a sorceress. There is a Polish folk band named Percival that named themselves after the gnome Percival Schrutenbach from the books. They also made a few songs for The Witcher 3. The Runestones in The Witcher 3 are all named after Slavic gods. The last three male kings of Sintra died before the age of 42. Wolfheden are a type of werewolf which can be found in Skellige that is stronger and more dangerous than those from the continent. While Dimeritium can be found in several places in the north, the only place south of the Ruga where this can be found is in a single vein in Gemera. Who is Caleb Stratton? Was the final thought of Menno Coehorn before he died. Caleb Stratton was a member of Sultan's band who died fighting Nilfgaardians near the river Inna. There was a mage named Idrun of Ulevo, who created several monsters that still roam the continent around the time during the books. The mage Alzur was said to be the one who created Witcher mutations. No matter who wins the One Witcher 3, Meve will continue to rule her lands of Rivia and Lyria, possibly as a vassal state to whoever wins. The Baron that proposed to Milva and the Lady of the Lake while they were in Toussaint is a family member of Marlene de Trastamare, the woman who was cursed into being a spotted white. The city guards of Carrick were all females. Triss and Philippa most likely slept with each other. Istrid proposed to Yennefer. There is a village in Geso named Loredo, which has the nickname Bandit's Lair, that has been burnt down and rebuilt plenty of times over. The Nilfgaardians are said to have a bit of elven blood due to their relationship with the Black Shade. You most likely know that Geralt's mother is Visenna, but you might not know that his father was a mercenary and a fighter named Corin. Asir Var-Anahit's cat is named Merlin. At the start of the Second Northern War, Demavend III of Adarn waited until his lover gave birth to his son before he would leave the city of Aldersburg, which was under attack by Nilfgaard at the time. The Arakas are an invasive species of monsters that came from the south, but now also live in the northern realms. There is a noble family of vampires that lived in Nilfgaard by the name the Van Moorlams. There is a bazaar in Stedaris, where items from all over the continent can be bought. People from Toussaint and Metana might start fighting each other over which land has the best wine. During the Second Northern War, Nilfgaard used Angren for wood to build ships. Dwarves and gnomes were on the continent before the elves arrived. A lot of mages have houses and villas in the Lyrian mountains because of the beautiful views and the favorable taxes. Viraxis overthrew his father with the help of the Brotherhood of Sorcerers. As a result, he had a debt to pay to them. Ithleen is sometimes mentioned as being one of the reasons why so many girls that were thought to be afflicted with the curse of the Black Sun were killed. There is a brothel in Vizima, which is run by vampires. Regis once dated the leader of these vampires. Regis, at some point, had a relationship with the succubus in Toussaint. This succubus was still around in Toussaint during Blood and Wine, where she has regular contact with Palmerin de Lonfol. While Lebioda and the Eternal Fire aren't the same religion, Lebioda is still respected by the followers of the Eternal Fire, and they have taken over some of the customs from Lebioda's belief. Lebioda's bones are stored in the Great Temple in Novigrad and will be taken out during some holidays when people are allowed to kiss his bones. Lebioda died when he was eaten by a dragon. His bones were recovered from the dragon's feces. Delwyn of Craigjau, one of the contestants at the tourney in Blood and Wine, is only 13 years old. The city walls of Beauclair, while once useful, now serve little purpose, and thus the inhabitants of Beauclair made a few extra gates in them. The inn in Lindenvale has two different innkeeps. They switched based on if it's day or night. While generally speaking slavery is not accepted in the northern realms, those who were in deep depths in Novigrad would sometimes be forced to work in the mines. They, however, would not be called slaves, even though that was what they kind of were. The first thing Geralt killed after setting out on the path was a man who was attempting to have his way with a woman who did not want it. Geralt expected a thank you for killing the man, but instead the woman was yelling hysterically and passed out from seeing the man being killed. Shani stole stuff from the Oxford Academy to pay for her studies. Melitle is the oldest human religion on the continent. The shrines you can find throughout Velen belong to the goddess Verna. The religion that follows Lilith, the goddess associated with the Black Sun, is widely followed in Hakeland and Zarikania. The Duchy of Atra, even though it lies next to the coast, is very dry and hot. Nilfgaard has its own organization of mage hunters. However, instead of hunting all mages, they only went after those that didn't submit to the Empire. The leader of these mage hunters was Isaiah Cohorn, a distant relative of Menno Cohorn. There are two magic academies in Nilfgaard. The largest magic academy in Nilfgaard is the Imperial Magic Academy. The Imperial Academy of Nilfgaard is the largest competitor of Oxenford Academy. King Griffin of Temeria once tried to turn a small village into a university city. It didn't really work out. Sea witches, witches that live underwater, are said to be more powerful than most land mages. Werewolves are an often forgotten race in The Witcher, but they do exist, although they don't look much like humans. Nilfgaard in many areas is ahead of the North when it comes to acceptance and what they allow of non-humans and women, except of course when it comes to slavery. Dunny pretended to be an illegitimate son of Akerspark, the former king of Macht. The bridge connecting Novigrad to Temple Owl is named after a man who used half of his fortune to import food for the people during a famine. The Dragon Mountains have that name because there are plenty of dragons in those mountains. There is a place in the Blue Mountains called Gwent. This is where the 3 elves of the Blue Mountains hide out. There are a lot of underground caves in Toussaint that are home to many unknown creatures. There used to be a time where it was fashionable for nobles and more well-off people to have themselves teleported to places at their will. One of these persons only made it through the front half of their body, and many others sometimes would not appear at all. False Ciri was originally meant to appear in Witcher 3. Among other cut content for Witcher 3 were also several other water-based monsters and creatures which would have been nice to have, as the drowners and sirens just got kind of annoying after a while. The Forktail near Kermoren was originally supposed to be a manticore. Dudu made a lot of money by selling goods to the Church of the Eternal Fire. There is a man in The Witcher 2 who wants you to collect feathers for him so he can become a birdman. During the short story of The Last Wish, King Hurrybird ruled over Redania. Hurrybird was heavily taxing mages and spells and potions in Redania. As a result, they became hard to find. Hurrybird's son would soon after take over the rule of Redania. This is Vizimir II. Vizimir would rule for about 20 years, until he was assassinated. The Witcher timeline isn't always accurate, and it can be hard to be sure when a short story or event took place. There is no accurate map of the continent, and there most likely never will be one, as from what I gathered, it seems like Sapkowski doesn't want it, as it would limit his own writing freedom, when people could start calculating travel times and distances. Gascon is about 17 to 18 years old during Thronebreaker. Jacques the Aldersberg is Elfin. Yennefer's clothes and accessories are all made out of materials that make it impossible for her to be tracked down when she does not wish someone to do it. During the search for Ciri, Geralt and his Hanse came very close to finding her in the middle of a blizzard, but they thought the tracks were from a mountain sheep, while Ciri thought she was in a different world. If they would have found each other right there and then, Cahir, Anglem and Milva might still have been alive.